Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Blokes podcast. Ryan Hassan here, as always, joined by Nick Sutherland. Nico, how you doing, my friend?
I am moist and left of centre.
What part of your anatomy are we talking about here?
Which part would you like it to
be? You are left of centre of the screen, and it is a bit moist down where you are, I hear.
It is. I've just been outside in the rain, so there is quite a considerable amount of precipitation, and as such, I am moist.
Yeah, I like standing in the rain.
I like singing in the rain.
Yeah, were you singing today in the rain?
I may do.
Yeah.
We were laughing off air about how a lot of women don't like the word moist.
Yeah. I think it's a hilarious word.
And it's funny. It's a divisive word. Some people can deal with it. Some people can't. And it's, I suppose, a little bit risque at the start of this episode. So sorry, listeners, if you're having your breakfast or whatever. But panties is another one.
Panties.
The word panties, you know. Yeah, you listen to it. We were watching an American movie the other day, and they said the word panties, and Em was like, "Oh," she had this like aversion to it, like a physical reaction to the word. Yeah. And I'm like, all right, but she's got no issue with the word moist, where other women I know have that same physical reaction to moist.
Could be reversed, but panties are okay. Yeah. It's like we all NLP tells us that we all have a different meaning for every word. You know, so like someone, if I said the word, if you're listening and I say the word picnic, then you think, well, what do you think of when I say the word picnic? And then what do you think of, Nick, when I say that word? What's the first thing that pops into your mind?
Yogi Bear. What's in your picnic basket?
Yeah, this is what I mean. So some people, you think of Yogi Bear and that scene. Some people will think of, sitting on a blanket, eating food and having a picnic. Someone will think of the chocolate bar, a picnic. And then even if you have two people that are thinking of sitting on a rug eating the food, it'll be a different colored rug for different people. It'll be a different location. It'll be different food. Like we all have our own meaning, individual meaning for every single word. And we tend to give different words, different powers based on the experiences we've had them in the past. So maybe there was the panties one makes me remember that Seinfeld episode when Jerry was we were dating a girl who was starting to talk dirty to him in bed and he didn't know what to say. And she started talking about her panties. And Jerry said, what, the one your mum laid out for you last night or something? And she just got up and left. And he was telling George, and George is like, it's not even bad. It's just weird. he's like, I panicked. I didn't know what to say. I was just trying to keep up.
I panicked. What are you wearing there? What's around your neck today?
I've got what do they call this?
It's like a shade or something.
Yeah, this sounds exciting. Quantum science. It's a quantum science necklace thing that has all these magical powers. But one of the things it apparently does is protect from EMFs as well. So I wear that sometimes near the heart, from the phone, the magnetic frequencies and all that kind of stuff. And, looks pretty cool too. So yeah, Mel got them for me a while ago. So I'll bust them out every now and then. So it's I remember when she got it, there was a whole deal, quantum science. You can go to like the website, it tells you all the stuff that it does and all that. But I just thought I'd, get a bit dressed up for you today, Nick. I'm even wearing a t-shirt.
Thank you. You are wearing a t-shirt. That was very well enunciated. I'm wearing a t-shirt.
I am wearing a t-shirt.
I had a client the other day pronounce something. How some people put a K on the end of something. Yeah. And I said, I didn't know there was a K on the end of something. And he's like, what? Oh. I went, don't worry, it's what I'm doing here. I pick up on people's words. But it was just an example of how we speak mindlessly and we don't even listen to what we're saying. And so if someone was to actually listen and consciously say the word something, there would be no K on the end of it. But it's just I'm going to use the word lazy, but it doesn't mean they're a lazy person, but it's just lazy speaking. It's just something. It's like dragging your feet when you're walking. It's like scuffing your feet.
Yeah. I've been noticing it with Tommy. I've been trying to pick myself up because he'll try and say words but won't quite say them correctly. So where we are, there's a lot of geckos, and he says like gokko, gokko. But then now I found myself calling them gokkos. So now I'm just reinforcing him saying it the wrong way. So now I've got to say, look, it's a gecko, because now I start calling them gokkos. Because when he says it, it's real cute, and you kind of want to play along. But yeah, it's funny. But today we're talking about. Go.
Are you going to teach him Thai? Are you going to get him speaking Thai from an early age?
I think he's naturally developing a hybrid language at the minute, because
awesome.
but now he's nearly spent like half his life here. He probably speaks more Thai than me and Melissa do, to be honest. So yeah, he's kind of got a bit of a hybrid language, but he's stringing some words together and that and all that kind of stuff. So it's good. It's good fun.
Yeah.
It's good fun.
Oh yes, we are speaking about ego today.
Ego, ego.
The almighty ego.
The almighty
ego. And what prompted?
Yeah. What prompted
this? Because I said to you, I sent you a message saying let's chat about ego, and you're like, oh yes, I'm in for that. So I was sitting with a client yesterday, and let's go back a decade first to when I did my work on my metanoia, and I broke down and then rebuilt, and I realized afterwards that I was operating off a very irrational, rigid, tight belief system that was producing a lot of anxiety and stress and depression and whatnot. And so fast forward, was it 7 years later? So maybe 3 years ago, I was doing a cognitive behavior therapy 4-day advanced program with Dom DiMattia, and he came in, and his first words to a room full of therapists and whatnot was, "You're all ignorant, you're all incompetent, you're all mediocre," and most people in the room went into suffering, went into a bit of shock, a bit of, I took it personally. And I didn't. I just sat there, and I actually had the opposite reaction. I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. This is awesome. How brilliant is this 4 days going to be? This dude's off his head. What's going on here? It's great. So I wasn't triggered where everyone else was, and I couldn't figure it out. So we had a chat about it, and long story short, the work I did in my metanoia, I stopped operating off those ego-driven beliefs. That's all, the me, the my, the I. And so I was able to sit there and listen to him without being triggered. So I sat in that space between stimulus and response that I talk about from Viktor Frankl's work in the logotherapy. And I was able just to observe it for what it was. And that's when I did that, it was I could hear the actual truth of it. And we are all ignorant. We are all incompetent. We are all mediocre to some degree, and that's okay. It's not a bad thing. It's just real.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And then yesterday, a client said to me, he's come back after some life events, and he said, my wife and I have found your work to be far more superior than any other therapist work and that we've been to. And I just observed this little, it was like a waking giant. It was like there was this food trickling down to where the ego dwells deep within, and it's laid dormant predominantly for such a long time, and that word superior sort of trickled in, and I sat there and I really just observed this, and I thought, how curious. I'm like, this ego is still in there somewhere. You can't get rid of it, you can't kill it, you can't destroy it, but and I mindfully just dismissed that superior word and was just went into gratitude that this guy and his wife had a nice experience with us in our programs. But I just thought it'd be great to talk about that today, and how easy the ego comes into play, and how often it happens, and how unaware people of it are, and what are the ramifications of that.
Yeah, I think it's a really good topic. It's something that we all think about, and it might be worth even, you know, a couple of things that you said there is, we talk about metanoia. That's how it's pronounced now. We talk about metanoia and how it's the breaking down and rebuilding of a human being. But what it really is the breaking down and rebuilding of the ego structure, the ideas around who we are as a person and our, identity or whatever you want to call it. And it might be worth even starting off by talking about, because like we said at the start, everyone has a different meaning for every word. It's probably worth defining what ego actually means. Like what is the ego? Because there is a few different definitions. If you look up the epidemiology of the word ego, it simply means I. So that the sense of I as an individual human being and my, I suppose, separateness from others. And I mean, that's quite a broad term. That's a whole nother topic. What is the sense of I? Then you think of people like Freud. Freud had the id, the ego, and the superego. And in his definition, the ego was a lot around, the id was these primal desires, and the ego was what kind of buffered those desires to the outside world. Like if the id says, I'm hungry, fucking eat right now, then the ego would say, well, no, you're in the middle of a meeting, wait till the meeting's over. So it would buffer it. So there's kind of these different meanings for the word ego. And it's probably worth, defining. So the way I suppose I see ego is that the ego is not a bad thing or a good thing. I think an ego is just our psychological concepts around who we are as a human being. So like that's why I think when you had your metanoia, Nick, and probably the same with me, it's like the breakdown of the ego and the rebuilding. There was still an ego there, but the ego was just made up of different structures, and a lot of beliefs and ideas around who you were started to change. And if we start to get really deep, it's like we all need to have an ego so that we have a separate experience of life. That's why I've sort of got the belief that and people can believe what they want, but it's like, let's say that existence is the universe trying to experience itself, or you can call it God, or whatever words that you want to use. But it's like we all started, even science tells us, we all started from this single point, this dot, and then this big bang happened, this explosion, and over billions of years, we've ended up in the position that we are now. And there's all these different elements going on. So kind of the ego is there because I can only know what I am by knowing what I'm not. And so, like, Nick has a different ego to me. Every human being has a different ego. And so I can start to understand the world by having this thing. And I think any teachings that talk about getting rid of ego, the way I define it is that we can't get rid of ego, because ego...
No, as I said, we don't want to get rid of it because we need to differentiate ourselves. But I think, like anything, if we look at it on a spectrum, there's no ego, so we can't define who we are, and there's way too much ego. I think it's about finding that healthy balance point.
Yeah, so the way I view the world is that we're all from the same place, and we are, really, and without getting too spiritual, we were literally birthed out of exploding stars, and that's so we all came from the same place at some point. So we're all deeply connected in that sense. We're all brothers and sisters,
interconnected.
We're all interconnected, not just with other human beings, or with animals, with plants, with everything, right? So we're all one in that instance, but then we are all here to have an individual experience of life. We don't want to have two Nicks or two Ryans. We just want one each. We want to be individuals. So it's like, I know that I'm here and have this egoic structure of who Ryan is, and I'll play that game of Ryan, but I still know that at the end of the day, we're all connected and all one. So I think for me, we start to get to an unhealthy ego, or we start to become egoic, is probably another term, when we don't know, or we forget that we are all connected and we're all kind of here playing a bit of a game. And I get too identified with that psychological structure of who Ryan is. Because if I get too identified with it, I feel like I have to protect it then. That's why if I say, Nick, I don't like that shirt, you get really defensive if you're really identified with the way that you dress.
Yeah, if I felt this defined me and you were attacking me, then I would feel the need to defend myself, and then I would end up in a heightened state, and then I would stop being present, and then I'd be in fight flight mode and all that sort of stuff. So the ego really, if not kept in check, I suppose, can have a psychological and physiological effect on us, and spiritual, I suppose.
Yeah. And what you said, I don't know if I've said this on the podcast before, but your actual story with the client, it makes me remember, I think it's Christine Hassler. I was listening to her on a podcast years ago. And she was starting to see clients, and she had this mentor who was teaching her, life coaching, whatever she does, that kind of thing. Anyway, she did this session with a client, and it went amazing. Like, incredible things happened, and the client was probably telling her how amazing she was and blah blah blah. And so after the client left, she was so so excited that she called her mentor straight away and said, "Oh man, this client and this happened and this has shifted for blah blah blah." And the mentor, who must have been really like, I love it, the mentor was like, "What are you doing?" And she's like, "What do you mean?" She goes, "You just used your client to make yourself feel good." And then she was like, "Oh, ouch." Because it's like, that's like another saying. It's like, we're never as bad as people say, and we're never as good as people say, but our ego really wants to have people have a high opinion of us. And it's so interesting that you notice that little thing. I notice it in me all the time as well. And it's like, okay, it's like a little rabid dog that you got to calm down a little bit.
I asked Shane to write a bio for the Myndfit website so we could put him on the Myndfit website, and he hadn't done it after a week. And I checked back and I'm like, what's going on? And he's like, "I'm really struggling to do it." I said, "Why?" He goes, "Because you kept whacking my ego so much in our sessions. Like, he came in very ego based, and he's done a lot of work to reduce the amounts that his ego is in play." And he goes, "So every time I'm trying to write something nice about myself, I feel like I can't because it's my ego. I feel like I'm being egotistical." I'm like, it's and it's so natural. You go from one end of the spectrum to the other, and then you can come back and find that balance
out.
Yeah.
But
it's and I often talk to clients about how we've got this 10-80-10 rule, and I think I have talked about this in the podcast, and 10% of clients will get amazing results and think it's superior work, and 10% will think it's total shit, and 80% will just go, "Yep, that's great." And so I'm talking to Shane and other people about, you can't ride those highs and lows, and working with AFL players and elite sports people as well. I'm like, you can't read the press, because as soon as you start buying into what other people are selling you, you're handing them the key to your happiness. And when they're saying nice things about you, "Oh, I feel great." When they say not nice things about you, which they're going to do, "Oh, I feel not great." And so you're not actually, your emotional intelligence isn't in play there, because you're not able to self-manage and self-regulate.
Yeah, and if we think about the unhealthy ego, there's two main functions of it. One, it always needs to be right, and number two, it just has an insatiable appetite that will never be filled.
And that's that, one of the three amigos. I must get what I want. I'm attached to a desired outcome. Attachment is a craving. It's a desire. I need more. I have $1 million. I need $2 million. You can never sate the appetite of the ego.
Yeah, because it gets what it wants, and then immediately wants the next thing. And it's like, that's why it's like addiction. Like Gabor Mate, like his book on addiction's called "In the Realm of the Hungry Ghosts." And I think that realm of the hungry ghosts, I'm not sure, it's an ancient story, but it's these ghosts walking around with these big bellies, but they're just trying to shove stuff in their belly to fill themselves up, but they can never be full because the food just kind of falls through them because they're ghosts. But they don't understand, so they're just constantly trying to shove stuff in from the outside. And this is a form that the ego can take. It's just, let me validate my experience through external sources. And then, like you said, like, it can be, whether it is an elite sports player reading the press, or it can even just be, someone placing way too much value on the opinion of a coworker or a family member or something like that. The scales are out of balance there. Like, we should be listening to our own inner voice over these other voices. Doesn't mean we don't take advice, but we listen to our own inner voice. But so many people are completely out of whack where their ego is kind of formed based on what other people say or think about them, or what they perceive other people say and think about them.
Yeah, because they're using one of those other of the three amigos that I must be loved or I must be liked. And it's so, I remember these three amigos, they all start with I must. So it's very ego, it's very rigid. I must be liked. People must say, Ryan must say that my shirt looks really nice. If he doesn't, then oh my God, it's our sense of worth is suddenly handed over to somebody who is probably struggling with their own capacity to make themselves happy. So when we're coming from the ego, we are often in suffering, and when we're in suffering, we're in survival mode. So when we're in survival mode, we can't then be there for other people around us. We can't give to any of our relationships. We're always just trying to take, and just has this real, you end up down that rabbit hole pretty quick.
So I was just scrolling through an old booklet, and I found I write down like different things out of books that grabbed my attention. And then there was one here. This is from the 5 levels of attachment. I think this is Don Miguel Ruiz's son wrote this, but he may have contributed to it as well. And this is kind of the point where we've had enough of the ego. But the quote from the book is, "There comes a point in life when we grow tired of needing to be right, especially when we see how this ego-feeding need affects our relationships with people who just want to be our friends, with the beautiful souls who just wanted to love us."
I had an experience with it with Em. She's been a great mirror / teacher for me, and yeah, I caught myself. My ego started to try and battle hers, and yeah, I got caught up in this "I must be right" thing, and I was lucky enough to be able to observe that pretty quickly. And it took me back to an expression I heard that being right isn't more important than other people's feelings. And it was so nice to step out of the ego again. And I can always tell when I'm in the ego, I'm not in alignment with myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so whenever I step out of the ego and find my way back into alignment, it's just that it's instant. Oh, it's like sitting in a bath, and it's
It's a letting go.
Home.
It's a
it
letting
feels like
go,
home again. Yeah, it's a relief.
Yeah.
It's a lightness. It's a and it's amazing. I bumped into a client having a coffee the other day, and just got chatting about how they're going, and she said, my favorite session was still the one where you just cracked my ego. She said it was I can remember it like a day, and I just kept reflecting to it without judgment and everything. And I guess without being egotistical, I'm quite well versed in doing this now after 10 years, and helping people to step out of their ego and just through simple reflection and getting them to realize how often they're in it. But to hear, and she's not the only one, to hear that the clients that one of their favorite sessions is getting out of the ego, I think that speaks a lot about how much that's contributing to their suffering.
Yeah, because I think if you feel into the energy of that ego and needing to be right and always needing more, it's just so tight. Everything's so tight. And that's why I think when it feels like that nice warm bath, because when you step out of it, it's like everything can just relax.
Yeah.
And this is why so many arguments are so futile, because if you're both in ego, so there's obviously a disagreement about something, right? And this can be in relationship, friendship, work, whatever. There's a disagreement about something. Now, if you're both in ego, you both need to be right, because that's a function of the ego. Good luck resolving anything. It's literally impossible, and that's why it's so important to come back to just saying this is what I'm feeling, and they say this is what I'm feeling, and you both validate what you're both feeling. Because you can argue semantics, like you should have done this or shouldn't have done that, or for weeks or years, but you can't argue with what someone's feeling. That's truth, and that can.
But if you're using should in an argument, you're just using a cognitive distortion. So you're not going to be seeing straight or thinking clearly. And then if they start doing it, they're going to be distorted. So it's like two distorted things trying to fit together. It's just not going to happen.
No, and I think the reason why, your client said that, and I get the same thing, a lot of clients, when we start to break down that ego, is a beautiful thing, because what happens, So the ego is formed by all of our past experiences. It's like a tree that's grown, and there's a big trunk, there's main branches, there's little branches that come off that, and there's leaves, but it's a giant structure, or it's a neural network. And then I say that that's me, and I get really, really identified with that. And when I get identified with that so much over so many years, I feel like I need to protect it. So my whole life becomes one of protection. I'm always in protection mode. I'm trying to protect my sense of self, my psychological self. I'm trying to protect who Ryan is. So if someone says something that I don't believe is true about me, then I want to fight back. I want to, get back at them because, how dare you attack the idea of Ryan, So I'm in protection. So what's the opposite to protection is connection, right? And so then people, we all crave this connection. We want to be able to be fully open and get close to people, but we can't if we're stuck in our ego. And that's why people are, I think, and clients are able to connect with others so much easier after we start to shake that tree and find out what falls down.
It's my, Emma's daughter, 17, and her and I are obviously creating and constructing a relationship, because we're living together now. And it's funny, she came into the bedroom last night. I'm growing, I've got a shaved head, but I'm growing this lovely bit on the back just as I...
what is going on there, Nick?
Yeah, well, I'm creating a source of stimulus for people to get really triggered, and I'm loving the reactions people are going and how many opinions are being thrown at me, and I'm just like, I don't care.
For those listening and not watching on YouTube, we've got the full shaved nude nut head, but then he's growing this patch on the back, this rectangular patch. I've said I'm going to grow a giant dreadlock out of it. Yep.
And so, Ava came into our room last night, and I took my hat off, and it was freshly shaved, and she's just laughing. She goes, "You're such a weirdo," and it's like it's a common theme. She keeps calling me this weirdo, and I just sat there and I went, I'm okay completely with who I am and what I'm doing, Aves. But if you need to compartmentalize me or frame me in your head as a weirdo or whatever, that's okay. And I was obviously joking, saying it, taking the piss. But it was just interesting to see how many people will label you, which is another cognitive distortion, labeling. So it's because they need to make sense of what they don't think is right, and black and white, right or wrong. So it's another distortion. So, these distortions come into play so much when the ego is involved.
That's a really important point. This labeling, labeling and judging that we do. I was reading recently that one of the reasons why we do that, why we constantly narrate, and this is like the ego doing this. The ego wants to categorize and label things so it has some sort of certainty to hold on to, so it can be right. I think that comes back to that again. But that we develop that function in order to buffer us from reality, because reality's intense. So it's like if I go sit in front of a tree, I can just try and witness that tree. But then the mind or the ego wants to jump in and say, well, what kind of tree is it? Is it that's a pretty big tree. That's pretty big leaves on that tree. It's blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden I feel like I know that tree because I've created some mental concepts around it. When instead I can just be with the tree and not be in that egoic state. And we do that with people as well. When the ego walks into a room and automatically tries to say, what's the hierarchy of this room? It's like, okay, is that person better than me? Is that person worse than me? And we try to work out where do I fit into that hierarchy and how comfortable I am in that spot.
And I think I should be at the top, but he thinks he should be at the top, so I'm going to attack him and make sure I can get to the top. It's so childlike. It's so immature.
It's like the animals, It's like the episode of, remember the episode of South Park? I haven't watched South Park in years. I should get back into it. But it was the episode of South Park, and one of the girls in class started getting some boobs. Like, she was obviously going through puberty first, and she was the one that no one paid attention to. And all of a sudden, overnight, all the boys started just paying attention, wanting to be her friend, and they ended up kind of becoming like apes and just grunting, just trying to get her attention. That's what we do. We're trying to be the alpha, male or female, or if we have a low opinion of ourselves, we just try and fit in, to certain circumstances. But that's all ego. Whether it's we're trying to be the best or we think we're the worst, that's both egoic.
Yeah, but you said life can be pretty intense, or reality can be pretty intense. But I think that intensity comes from, I talk about living in the reality of what would, should, and could happen. So would is comparing, that's a distortion. Could is jumping to conclusions, so that's a distortion. And should is critical thinking, so that's a distortion. So you're living in a distorted reality if you're in would, should, or could, versus the reality of what is. And that's, as you said, just being with the tree, just observing things as they are, without then trying to stick a label or a definition onto it. And I think a nice or an easy way to do it is just to observe things without then applying meaning to it. And that's what we do so much. That's where the ego really, drinks the blood, is when it sounded dramatic, didn't it? It's like a mosquito.
I like that dramatic image of vampire.
Yeah, or a leech or a mosquito. Neither of those are things that we really like. But it does. So it's like, okay, some stimulus could be, I don't know, someone's not talking to me. I'll walk into a room and a family member or a friend or a colleague or whatever just sort of grunts at me and gives me nothing. What the ego will then do is leap up, and it's awoken. It's like, oh, something's going on here. There's some stimulus. And unless we've trained our minds to sit there and observe it and to not make it about us and just it is what it is, the ego will then apply meaning to that. Oh, that means they're angry at me. That means they've had a bad day. That means they've got the shits. That means they're hungover. That means this. That means that. And it's all imagination, which is anxiety. It's all jumping to a conclusion. It's all worst case scenario. It's all heavily distorted reality. You've stepped out of the reality of what is. This person is not talking much. That's all it is. That's all the reality is. And then you go into this distorted reality and make up that narrative, and all of a sudden you're so far down the rabbit hole, you're like Alice in Wonderland, and you're gone. And they come back and they say, "Oh, hey mate, how are you?" And they were lost in thought. They were doing their own little thing, none of which you knew because you're not in their head. There's not actually a problem, and they come back and go, "Oh, hey mate," and you're pissed off at them. You're like, I was fucking fine until I walked in here and you were being a prick. I was being a what? What?
No idea.
When did I become a prick? What did I know? All of a sudden, their egos kicked in, and they're like, "What? I'm a prick. How am I a prick?" And then they're confused, and then it's all destructive.
It's all imagination.
I was just sitting here thinking about the amazing weekend I had, and I met this girl, and blah blah blah, or I went skiing or did something, and I was in a really good place, and then you've come along and called me a prick. It's like worlds apart, and so that's a great example of how we don't all live in the same world. We all live on the same planet, but we all live in completely different, separate worlds, and that world is created from within.
Yeah, and that's the key word used there was training. It's something that we really have to train, because that part of our brain its mechanism is to give meaning to everything that stimulates it.
If only there was a business that specialized in training people's minds and getting them mentally fitter and stronger and staying more present.
Yeah, if anyone out there listening wants to create that kind of business, go for it.
I saw someone started following me, and they were Mindful something. I think they've done some work with you. I can't remember who they were, but they spelt it MYNDFUL, and I was like, "Oh, look at that!" That's,
I think that's one of our RCT students. Yeah. I think for the same reason, like not like I thought you were trying to just be cool by spelling it different, but it was like it's my mind, like that's
Yeah.
Like
be accountable. Yeah.
Using that training that meaning, it makes me think of I remember listening to Byron Katie a while ago, And like her daughter she told the story, her daughter was going through some addiction or alcoholism, and she was classic, like mum sitting at home knowing that she was on a bender, and then the mind just going crazy with all the imagination, like what we're talking about, like, you know, I need to go and get her. Who's she hanging out with? Is she overdosing? When are the police going to knock on the door? I need to get in my car and start searching the streets. And then she eventually she kind of broke it down and just said, lady sitting in a chair worried about her daughter, and then gave it no more meaning apart from that. And so then this is the training that we have to go to, but we have to
stepped out of that unnecessary suffering. And that's really important, I think, for people to understand the difference between necessary and unnecessary suffering. So, you know, anxiety, depression, guilt, anger, all those, the four emotions we term as suffering in here, are very healthy. They're very, Polly's scratching. I've got the dog at work day. There's Daisy down there and Polly's over there somewhere.
Polly wants to put her 2 cents in.
Yes. So, you know, I had a client this morning come in, anxiety, panic attacks, and I'm like, oh, if your anxiety was sitting next to you, what would you do? And she go, I'll push it away. So I'm like, oh, well, that's very gentle. That's really nice. Most people want to blow it up or set it on fire or stab it with a trident, but she just wanted to push it away because she doesn't know what to do with it. And I was like, okay. And then so we got talking. I explained that anxiety is just an emotion. It's on the spectrum of human emotions. So it's we're going to encounter it. If your daughter goes out and she's heavily into drugs and alcohol, there's going to be a healthy amount of anxiety there. Your mothers are going to worry about their children. That's understandable. The emotional reaction is in proportion to what they're experiencing, to what's going on, to what the situation is. Where it becomes unnecessary is where her mind then jumps into all of those distortions and goes, oh, and she's going to die, and then the police are going to turn up, and that's all imagination, completely running off into the distance, into the future, conjuring the worst possible case scenario of doom and gloom, and then sitting and living in that. And that's where that's all completely unnecessary. So what she did, because she's trained her mind, and that's what we're doing here, is step back into the reality of what is. The reality of what is I am sitting here and my daughter is not here.
Yeah, it's like the story of like the you know, your partner's really late home from work and hasn't answered your call and hasn't let you know and everything, and all of a sudden the voice in the head pops up and starts going into these distortions. Where is she? Why hasn't she answered her phone? If she calls,
it's like a commentator
doing this. Yeah, it's a commentator. But here's the funny thing that we'll do: it'll be so fucking pissed off at her and all these scenarios. Then all of a sudden, she does call, or she calls, and you're like, oh, fuck it, I'll answer and golf at her. And she's like, hey, babe, sorry I'm late, but, you know, it's our anniversary, and I've organised this amazing dinner for us, and blah, blah, blah. And you forgot it was your fucking anniversary. And then you get off the phone, all of a sudden, that same commentator goes, she's so beautiful. I love her so much. I can't believe she did that for me. And you forget that 5 minutes ago, you were ready to attack, you know.
But then the ego will attack you for not being perfect. Remember, it must be perfect. So then you're fucked up, and the commentator switches and turns on you and goes, "You prick! I can't believe you treated her so poorly 5 minutes ago. You absolute bastard! You're the worst boyfriend in the world, and you forgot her anniversary, and you sat here judging her and blah blah blah." And so,
and we listen to it. It takes all these different sides of an argument, and at the time, we take its advice, even though it can be completely opposing sides, and we forget the advice. You know, if it was a relationship coach at that time that she didn't answer the phone call, and he said, "That's it. You're going to dump her. She's doing something dodgy. Don't answer the phone." Then afterwards, you'd be firing that relationship coach because that's horrible advice. But we don't. We listen to it next time. You know, something happens because we don't do the training, and we let this imagination run wild. And you know,
it comes back to Viktor Frankl, in between stimulus and space is a response, and between stimulus and response is a space, and that's what we're training people to have the capacity, which isn't human nature, to step into that space and just observe things. Observe, my partner's not here. She hasn't answered the phone. There is no meaning beyond that. I have ignorance and attachment are the source of that suffering that I talk about, I'm ignorant. I literally do not know. I have no evidence to form a valid opinion or belief upon. Most people's beliefs are so invalid that when you apply logic or reasoning to them, they just simply crumble because there's no substance to them. So we're living in this, with a head full of falsities, and it's just causing so much anguish.
This comes back to something we've touched on the podcast before, was just this great fear that we have as humans of sitting in the unknown. Because all of what you're talking about is
the unknown is the greatest source of stimulus.
Yeah, and so that's why we grab onto these alleged certainties, which, like you said, if you look at them objectively, you're like, that is completely fucking ridiculous. And normally we do think that later on, but at the time, the ego wants to hold on to this certainty. So it creates the stories, says this is what's going on. Now I have some sort of certainty. Why? Because I don't want to sit in the unknown. I don't want to sit in the space of I have absolutely no idea why that person's doing that or why this situation has happened. So the ego wants to cling to that uncertainty. So the more safe and we can feel with
No, listeners, it's not broken. Your stereo's not playing up. Your internet hasn't dropped out. I sent Ryan a message through Zoom saying let's intentionally go silent for 10 seconds to create some stimulus. And that silence is a massive source of stimulus. And I just want you to observe what happened in your mind then. Where did your mind just go racing off to? Did it sit there and just observe this is just silence? It doesn't mean anything beyond that. Did you just then go, oh no, what's happening? Did you whack the side of your stereo or
press the app to make sure that the timer keeps going?
But I just wanted to do it in the moment as we were talking about it, because it's such a beautiful source of stimulus. It's just that silence.
Yeah,
people hate silence.
They do. The ego wants stimulus, and it needs to know everything. And we don't know pretty much everything. We need to.
According to Dom DiMattia, we're all ignorant, we're all incompetent, we're all mediocre.
That's what I may have spoken about this before, but I had this idea. I think a lot of kids do growing up that when I was a little fella, I would say, well, people move into these different careers. And then whoever's sort of, at the top of a certain field, they know everything about that field. Like, so if
experts.
Yeah. So if someone's a scientist in a certain area, they literally know everything, right? And then I remember hearing the story about there was what was renowned as one of the greatest, if not the greatest, cell biologist in the world, and he was doing a lecture at a university in America. This is one of the top of the field, cell biologist. And in the universities, like in the States, they have the big classrooms with those massive whiteboards. And he started the whole lecture by saying, okay, imagine this entire whiteboard is the human cell. And then he walked up with his marker and put one little dot in the middle, and he goes, this is how much we know about the human cell. And it's like, well, this is like the top expert in this particular field just saying, we know 99.99%. We don't know 99.99% of how a human cell works, but this is a little part that we do know.
And so curiosity killed the cat, and it's just such, once again, human nature is we're so inquisitive creatures, and it can be a wonderful thing, but it's such a double-edged sword. So ignorance is bliss. So if we have no inquisitive nature, we're at this end of the spectrum. But if we're highly inquisitive, we're at that end. So once again, it's balance. It's coming back to balance. It's coming back to the middle of the spectrum. And, oh, that's interesting. But I don't have to know it. I don't have to know everything. I'm allowed to be ignorant to some degree. And that's okay. It doesn't define me. If someone says you don't know shit, I say, you're right. I don't know shit. That's you know that about me. So you're smarter than me. But you can't have that lightness and that looseness. You can't sit in that nice bath if the ego is there and takes that personally.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think I like to see things like the ego The ego is we have an ego, so an ego is a part of us, but it's not really who we are, you know. Because if I, it's
we always talk about we're not our thoughts, we're not our feelings, we're just the observation of them. But people heavily identify with their thoughts, and this is we think therefore I am. It hasn't helped us
no.
as a species, I don't think. But people are so in their emotions. I feel this, and so they're instantly associating with it. I feel this, so therefore I am angry, I am anxious, I am depressed, I have depression. No, you are just experiencing the feeling of anxiety. You're experiencing the feeling of sadness or hopelessness. The label for it is anxiety or depression, but you're actually feeling afraid. That's it. But you're not that feeling. It's impermanent. It's going to go away sooner or later.
It's the same way our body has changed. You know, it's like I can sit here and go, well, I'm Ryan and I'm 36 and I weigh 95 kilos. It's like, yeah, but remember when you were, in grade 3 and you were 35 kilos? It's like, which one?
Ryan.
It was still the same Ryan that was looking in the mirror at a different version. You know, which is, once again, we talk about this observer, like things are always changing and in flux, but that thing in there that's been watching the whole show, that hasn't changed. It's been the same. It's seen a lot of shit, I think, but it hasn't changed. It hasn't been traumatized. It never had anxiety. It never had addiction, but it witnessed Ryan go through all those things.
Yeah, and I think it's so important for us to stop and do a self-evaluation, a self-assessment, an honest, non-judgmental, non-binary assessment, and go, how often is my ego in play, and what can I do to start, emotionally maturing? Because if that 3-year-old Ryan is still in play, then the adult version of Ryan is going to be hamstrung to some degree. He's going to be an adult Ryan trying to run an adult business, being in adult relationships, being an adult father, an adult friend, but he's going to have these immaturities popping out in certain situations.
There's still a few there. I've got to be honest, there's a couple still there.
Well, it's an interesting thing when we talk about the inner child and let the inner child play. And that's really important, to be playful and to be light and to be childlike in our nature, but not childlike in our thinking. And there's a big difference between the two.
Yeah. I had a train of thought on something that you said, and I was going to talk about it, and it slipped my mind. What did we talk about?
Was it a steam train or an electric train?
It was an electric train.
Oh, nice. Well, if an electric train's going south and the wind is blowing from the south towards the north, which way does the steam go?
Yeah, no, there's no steam. It's an electric train.
I love using those things with clients because it's a wonderful way for me to test their belief system and to test how the ego is involved. And they sit there, I have to get this right. I have to know the answer, and that's the answer. But if they go, and then they get disappointed in themselves, it's just, once again, it's a way of bringing to the surface how they're operating.
Yeah. It's like, I still notice it within myself. Like when I was younger, we would, as a family, do like a lot of quizzes. Like we're big into like the quizzes, like in the paper or whatever. So there was a lot of kind of importance on knowing like general knowledge stuff. So then all of a sudden, that if we're thinking about the tree of Ryan's ego, then there's a strong branch around being and sounding intelligent. And I still find that. So when someone praises me for being intelligent, I kind of, like Shane writing the bio, I'm like, I'm like, okay, thank you. But I'm like not fully taking it on because I know that my ego, that branch is going, more people tell me I'm intelligent.
So the definition of happiness is to be content. Yeah, but we have this part of us that is constantly craving and thirsty and wanting more knowledge, more praise, more possessions, more this, more that. So so many people are walking around with an expectation that they should be happy, but they don't realize that the more they gain, the more they're just feeding their ego. So it's perpetuating this really destructive cycle. So yeah, just meditating on this sense of contentedness. This I have enough. I am enough. I love meditating on, like Marcus Aurelius. When he had someone behind him saying you are just a man or whatever it was. I love meditating on we can't do it all, we can't be it all, we can't have it all. And that's after repeating that internally with your eyes closed a couple of times, it creates this sense of peace.
Yeah,
it does. It says, that's right. I can't have it all. I can't do it all. I can't be it all.
And you can start to use life as well and start to notice, in what situations are you finding yourself defensive? In what situations are you finding yourself needing to be right? And then that's how we can start to notice the ego through using life itself. And whether that's in a, conversation with a partner or co-worker, or it can be just a situation that has or hasn't happened. And if you notice yourself starting to get constricted and feel like it should have been different or get defensive, then you can be like, okay, that's ego. Yeah. Right then, you're taking something that wouldn't have been conscious before and you're making it conscious. Otherwise, we just react. And I get defensive. And when I'm defensive, I just want to change. I want to change the person or change the situation to make myself feel better. But if
you're trying to change the external world to make the internal world feel better, where that's pretty fucked up on its head.
Good luck with that.
Yeah, exactly. So once again, we're training people in here to not be so reactive, but to be mindfully responsive and to go internally and check yourself when you feel yourself getting heightened, instead of trying to fix and change everything out there, because that's too big a job.
But it's too big a job, and your world, we've spoken about comfort zones a million times, but then your comfort zone will get smaller because your world will keep shrinking because you don't want it to touch your stuff. And it's like the the man who renounced the whole world and decided he was just going to go live in a cave by himself and meditate because the world was too stimulating for him. And he was in the cave and there was just this little drip of water that kept going all the time, and he just left the cave because that pissed him off as well.
And that's, I think, a great way of looking at it. It was we I was talking to a client yesterday about meditation, and he says, I use these apps and go to the beach and it's nice and relaxing, and sometimes I lay down, I lay on the couch, and I'm like, all right, let's do a meditation now. And he just did a 15-minute meditation, and he came out of that and he's like, oh, fuck, that was hard. That was such a hard meditation. And I'm like, because you actually meditated. You actually sat there and didn't just allow someone to relax you. We sat there and we actually built some resilience, built some tolerance. And the guy who ran off into his cave to meditate obviously wasn't meditating properly because he wasn't building tolerance to that dripping. He didn't use that drip as a source of stimulus to meditate on and sit there and just realize that the dripping is impermanent. It's going to go away. It's da-da-da-da-da. So, yeah, it's I'd love listeners that are listening to this to, once this is finished, turn off and just spend a couple of minutes afterwards with your eyes closed and just allow the words, I can't do it all, I can't be it all, I can't have it all, to run through your mind. And I am ignorant, I am incompetent, I am mediocre to some degree, and that's okay. Just really sort of put these bits of stimulus, I suppose, in that internal world, and let them bump up against the ego and just observe how it feels, and just reflect on how that experience is for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and just meditate on these feelings of defensiveness that you get, and just say, why am I so defensive if my partner says this or my boss says this or something happens? Like, why do I clam up like that? What's in my ego structure that's causing me to clam up so much? I think I don't remember the exact quote, but it's something along the lines of as soon as something loses the ability to offend you, it has no power over you. And this is what happens.
There's lots of them around, but go back to Don Miguel. Don't take things personally. It's whatever someone says has nothing to do with you. So if you're triggered, that says more about you than your ego than it says about them. But it also says a lot about them, what they're saying. So it's that. Balance, again, the word balanced comes back around. It's like, all right, what part did I play in this getting heightened, and what part did they play? All right, well, this says about them, but I don't need to judge or label. They're actually in suffering themselves. They're hurting. They're trying to hurt me, but I can't help them by just asking how they're doing if I'm in survival mode, if I'm struggling. So, yeah, it's something that we constantly need to keep working on and keep in check and keep in mind. We can't just sort of do a 12-week program and then go, that's it. The ego's fine. She's all, ego's in that cave. Yep, no worries. Because then something will start dripping and the ego will go,
So it's a lifestyle. It becomes a lifestyle, and we become very conscious of our internal as opposed to the external, and we just keep noticing when these things keep popping up. And then if we're not aware of it, we can't change it. If we're aware of it, we can make different decisions. And this is like you're saying, we go from reacting to responding.
It's our mental health. It's like with your physical health. It's pretty important. It's a lifestyle. If you stop going to the gym, your physical health is going to change, and if you stop doing your mental reps, then your mental health will change. So, yeah, that's about it.
And just something with we've got to finish up in a minute. Just I remember you spoke about the anxiety earlier, and I try and just offer people a little bit of a reframe on their anxiety, because I hear things like I gently. You said your client just wanted to push the anxiety away, but oftentimes I'll hear a lot more harsh terms as well. Like, I just want to fucking kill it. I want it to blow it to the other side of the world. Like, I hate it. These really, really strong words. And it's like, anxiety, yes, it's on the spectrum of human emotions, but it's feedback. And I often say a lot of people struggle with more chronic anxiety because they've been given this feedback. So say there's a little version of them just tugging on their shirt, trying to get their attention because they perceive some sort of threat. And then we're just pushing it away, like your client, go away, stop tugging on my shirt. Then over time it starts tugging harder on the shirt and you're like, go away. And in the end, it's like banging you on the side of their head, trying to get your attention, but you keep trying to turn away from it. So I often tell clients at the start, it's like, let's try and befriend this anxiety and start to see that it's probably a build-up of a lot of times that you've pushed it away when it's a part of you that's just trying to get your attention. It's actually trying to help you in some way.
It's just saying something's not working. When the anxiety I was experiencing, 11 or 12 years ago prevented me from leaving the house, it was telling me my mind was not working properly. It was a massive red flag that was trying to say, Nick, you've got to go and get your mind back in shape. You are so heavily distorted. The reality that you are creating for yourself is completely out of shape. But in doing so, it was also preventing me from going and getting my head in shape because it wouldn't let me leave the house.
Yeah.
What do you want from me, ego?
Because we push it away. We push it away, either, by distracting ourselves, or we can use alcohol or drugs, and we keep pushing it away. And it gets to the point where literally that anxiety tells your mind you can't leave the house because there's threat out there.
And then I get depressed because I can't leave the house, and then I want to, end my life, but I don't want to end my actual life. I just want to end the life that I'm living. And
exactly.
Oh, fun times, man.
Fun time. Let's wrap it up, mate. You got to go.
I do got to go.
Oh, look. Oh, God. If you're not on YouTube.
Hi.
Daisy.
Hi, I'm Daisy.
The little puppy. Is that
the new office manager? Hey, Daisy.
Office manager? It's a big role for a young pup.
Yes, but I can handle it.
How's she going with it? She's going all right with that role?
There's Paul.
Or is she finding it a little bit rough?
Dad
jokes are on point at the minute.
I love them. And I'm allowed to use dad jokes now because I've got a little baby.
Absolutely. You have permission. You have a card.
Oh. All right. Well, I better go. I've got someone coming in. So I'll... Good chat. Thanks, listeners. Thank you, listeners.
Be awesome. Notice the ego. Notice the unhealthy parts of the ego, and don't beat yourself up about it. We've all got this stuff going on, and use life as a teacher, and then meditate on those parts. And we wish you the absolute best on that journey. And myself and Nico will see you all next week.
Okay. Peace. Up. Take care. Bye.